Hello and welcome to Out of Spec Motoring. Today is a bittersweet day where we, one, give you a 60,000 mile update on our trusty Model 3, one of the two of them that we have, and also we say goodbye to it all together. Let's take a look at how well this car has fared over 60,000 miles of pretty much pure abuse. Now, this car has never been paint protection film, ceramic coated, waxed, nothing like that. I've actually run it through a brushed car wash almost every day that I'm at home. Again, this was just a car for us to use. It was a work vehicle and we used it as such. So let's take a look. It has a ton of chips up front, tons of bugs. Actually, some of these bugs are embedded into the paint because it got so hot and there's just no way those things are coming out, and it doesn't look very good. So coming around the side of the car, you'll notice that we've raised it back to stock height. Of course, it was sitting on the ground lowered. One of the downsides of that is the whole bottom of the car is pretty much scratched up, and there's actually porcupine, I guess we ran over one, just lodged everywhere in the plastic underneath the car. So coming around the side, of course, all the cameras work. Autopilot's never had an issue. There's just a few little minor scrapes and scratches. There's some etching in the glass from water spots and things like that. Nothing too major. The tire condition, this car is on its 4th set of tires, I believe. Over 60,000 miles, we drive it hard. It spends a lot of time on track. It has the track brake pads on it. And most recently we were drifting around on this set of tires. So, you know, it's always a good idea to trade it in when you have no tires left and you get the most use out of them. Charging's never been an issue. The onboard chargers work fine. DC fast charging still pulls 252 kilowatt on a V3 station on this car. It is not derated anything, and we'll get into the actual data of how this car fared over its miles, battery degradation, in just a little bit. Coming around the back of the car, there's someone who I believe keyed it over here. A few little scratches from us closing the trunk, nothing really major. You will see, though, a trunk full of dog hair, because we do carry the dogs around in here often. And that is just the state of this car. Now, what's interesting is the interior is held up so well. I mean, we have the dogs running around in here. We really don't take any care of it. And all it really needs is a wash, a little wipe down, and we're good to go. No rips in the material. And it's held up pretty well. So overall, you can pretty much treat your Model 3 like garbage, and it's going to last just fine. So now we're going to get into all the nerdy data about the car, my ownership period, and how it all sort of played out, and degradation, all that stuff. If you're not interested in all the geeky data and want to see the next segment, which will be some of the fun memories we made with the car, drifting it around racetracks, road trips with the family, setting the Cannonball coast-to-coast record. It actually still holds the record for New York to LA in terms of an electric car driving at speed, so that's cool. But let's go into the numbers. It's really cool. So the VIN was 3,207. It was built January 2018, like right in the first week, like January 8th, I believe. I was actually not the first owner. I bought it from a friend of mine, so I knew the car from the beginning, and I bought it with 8,400 miles on it on September 9th, 2018. Sold it on September 30th, 2019. So I had it just over a year, and really enjoyed my time with the car. I sold it with 58,118 miles on it. So even though the title's 60,000 miles, sorry, we're short by 1,800 miles, 1,900 miles. Close enough. Let's get into the maintenance. So everything that needed to be serviced on the car from day one. So my friend who bought the car didn't bring it into Tesla for anything. So I had it serviced, I believe, about 5 times. So that averages once every 50,000 miles for my ownership period. Nothing major. There were some sound system issues, which actually turned out to be software, so that wasn't a big deal. My headliner A-pillar piece, became delaminated and was covering the windshield a little bit. They replaced both of those. I had rear axles clicking. A lot of the early Model 3s didn't have their axles tightened down all the way, so they fixed that, thankfully, with just, I guess, new rear axles and tightening them down properly. Door handle replaced on the driver's side. It wasn't even a big deal. The car would just stick open, so if I opened the door and then closed it, and the handle didn't fold back in, it would pop the door open again, which it was kind of funny. Not a big deal. Anyway, my total cost on maintaining the car, including like washer fluid and rotation or alignment, was less than $100, which is just incredible. That it pretty much is maintenance free. That is true. You know, I didn't do any cabin filters or anything like that. It's just, again, it was 1 year and did pretty well. It did start, especially during the humid summer, start to smell on the inside, and I think Tesla fixed that through software by not letting all of the, I guess, mold or whatever it is build up in the AC system during like cabin overheat protection. But when I parked it inside, wasn't as big of a deal as leaving it outside when it would just constantly run. What else did we do to the car? Sorry, I'm referring to my notes here. We replaced the brake pads before the cannonball run. They actually had plenty of meat left on them, but they were cracked due to heat cycling. Again, this car spent a lot of time on track. We took it to the mountains and ripped it around the tail of the Dragon many times. And those heat cycles, especially rapid heat cycles on stock pads, it gets hot very quickly and they can have internal cracks. So whenever I'd hit the brake pedal, you'd hear them on the front. So that was annoying. We just put the Mountain Pass Performance track pads on there. Worked very well, not unbelievable, but they did a really good job for the stock size. Also, the brake fluid was just completely boiled on that car and the pedal was really squishy. I knew I was selling it, so I wasn't going to go through the trouble of bleeding it, but that's that situation. Let's see, the car had 4 sets of tires total. I purchased 2 of them. Of course, the car came with a set of tires. I replaced those. Those got replaced again. And then when my mom got her Short Range Plus Model 3, I ended up taking her Aero wheels and tires, gave her my sport wheels and tires with about 50% life left on the tires. And we did the Cannonball with the 18-inch Aeros, and that's what I ended up trading it in on. And by the way, we'll get into this in a second, but this car is the reason why I traded in the first Model 3. So continuing along, now we can geek out about our charging and the battery information. This is all the stuff that I think most people are interested in, including myself. So I've actually used Teslafy. If you don't use Teslafy, it's a fantastic tracking software. And we have logged everything from the day I took delivery of this car with 8,000 miles on it until pretty much 60,000 miles today. So my charging schedule for the car, just so you know how I maintain the battery, was typically charge it to around 70 or 80% at home. For road trips, I would full charge it right before I went. Typically, I would schedule charging to start just like an hour or 2 before we'd leave, so it would finish at 100. Tried to take care of the battery, but this thing was ran down to 0%, never all the way out to where it, it bricked the pack and it shut off the car, but we used the full battery many times in this thing. So let's take a look. Our total AC charges, I've charged 635 times on AC at 82 different locations. Again, traveling all the time, destination spots, etc., etc. And we added into the battery 7.7 megawatt hours. So that's 7,700 kilowatt hours. And we used, of energy pulling, 8.3 megawatt hours, and the rest is down to inefficiencies in charging like heat loss, etc., etc. So the total cost for me to move this car for AC charges was $557.64 at home. I pretty much, maybe just 1 or 2 times, a couple dollars, have paid for AC charging, but for the most part, it was free. Now, supercharging, it's been supercharged 256 times at 129 different superchargers. That car has, I'll overlay it, but it's been across the country, up and down the East Coast, and I've been to a lot of superchargers with this car, my Tesla before it, and all the other Teslas in the family. And so I love to supercharge. And what's cool is because I optimize my charging at supercharges to be in the peak charging range, the average amount of time I've sat at a supercharger was 22 minutes across those 256 charges. So that's really cool. In total, I've spent 3 days, 21 hours, and 53 minutes supercharging with this particular car. and it cost me only $225.96. Now, let me explain why that's the case. When I first got the car, of course, it was a pay-per-use vehicle. Free supercharging wasn't a thing on a Model 3. But I knew Tesla, because I have some friends that work at the company, and I had an inkling, not to call anyone out, but I knew Tesla was going to switch around their payment system. At the time, you could just supercharge without a credit card on your account, unlimited, and I knew they were going to switch and change that rule and wipe out all of the charging and basically comp all of that. So I took the credit card off the account, charged whenever, and then the day came and they wiped everything I owed to Tesla for that. So thank you, Tesla, for my free supercharging. I think I've referred enough people where I don't feel bad about it at this point. And then they launched the referral. Actually, it was just paid at that time, so that's when I paid the $225 for my driving. And then the referral program came out, and thanks to all of you, of course, and also some of my personal friends that have purchased, I've just never had to pay for supercharging since then. And I still have, I don't know how many thousands of miles left in the account, but supercharging pretty much is free, which is great. So yeah, that's where that $225 came from. Would have been a lot more, but that's just the particular case. Total energy added for supercharging, I don't think I put this in there, I'll get it for sure, but it's somewhere around 6.5 megawatt hours. So about even AC to DC charges. And one thing I'd really like to point out is on older Model S's and X's, you would start to derate your peak supercharging at around 3 megawatt hours. This car still pulled 252 kilowatt at a V3 station all the way up. There's been no hint of derating. I'm sure it will at some point when you hit a target, but it is so much higher than the S and X are. At least maybe not in the new 100 packs. I'm not quite sure what they're limited at, but the 75 and the 90 packs start at 3 megawatt hours to cut your charging speed, and this 3 just blew right through that. So that's pretty amazing. Now we get into, oh, also I think like 10 Chatham mode charges, not a big deal, but just different racetracks and towns and cities I Chatham mode. And again, that only came out recently in the Model 3, so I hadn't Chatham mode too much, but I still had my adapter from when I had my Model S before that. Now, battery degradation. So with all this charging and driving it hard, I didn't actually do the proper way of measuring battery degradation. Now, you can't look at the miles on the screen and say, oh, my car lost 10 miles full charge. The BMS doesn't know exactly what's in there. The only true way to measure your charging degradation is to pretty much full charge the car, drive it slowly so you don't have a lot of heat loss all the way down to 0, and look at that data, and that's about as close as you can do to look at kilowatt hours used. Now, I hadn't done that on this car, so we're going to look at miles, but again, take it all with a grain of salt. It's going to be plus or minus a few, but essentially, if we look at my starting range on the car, when I took delivery of it, it was 307 miles shown, and I had bounced the pack and everything, got it up to 310, which is what the car was originally rated for. At some point throughout ownership, the long-range rear-wheel drives were bumped up to 325 miles. Now, I actually gained 12 miles peak-to-peak range from that. So if I subtract 12 miles from the end of when I basically traded in the car, it left me with 300 and... oh, what is it? I didn't really write it down. But anyway, it works out to about a 9-mile range loss. So yeah, 301 miles from 310 originally. That's about 3% degradation. Again, plus or minus, I'm going to say it's probably closer to 5% over 60,000 miles. Again, we don't have exact figures because you can't look at the miles. You just don't know. But anyway, the pack held up extremely well. It still produced full power at full acceleration, charged fast. I mean, this is probably one of the hardest driven Model 3s out there, and the battery just didn't care. Now, sure, whenever I went on vacation, I left the battery at 40 or 50% just to protect it long term. Lithium likes to be around 30 or 40% for long-term storage. So I did go out of my way to take care of it when possible, but I also used all of it when needed. I didn't say, oh, I don't want to full charge the car because of whatever. I just, put that thing up to 100 and drove it all the way down to 0. With that said, the longest single drive I ever did with this car was 276 miles continuous. I'm sure I've done more on one charge by parking and driving around and parking, but single drive, 275 miles. And let's see, that was from Florida to the supercharger in Savannah. So again, probably drove a little quickly and used a higher watt hour per mile consumption than rated, but I believe that was a pretty much 100 to 0% drive. So over my around 50,000 miles of driving the car personally, the average temperature we drove in was 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and I used over 50,000 miles, just about 62,000 miles, 61.2 thousand rated miles. So that's what the battery really saw go through it. It's about 60,000 miles in and out of the battery, and of course more from the first ownership. And that's about a 272 watt hour per mile average over my entire ownership period. And that's an efficiency from rated to actually what I used at 80% efficient. So I spent in my 1 year owning the car, 42 days, 6 hours, and 22 minutes straight driving. That's whenever the car was in drive. And the fuel saved, this is a huge number. After my Model S, for a short period of time, I drove a Porsche Panamera Turbo, and if you go back in our earlier videos, you'll see us drifting that around the racetrack. Over the fuel that car would have used compared to the Model 3, I've saved about $8,500 in 1 year just in fuel savings. That's very cool. The last little bit of data point that I have for you is I had, let me look this up again one more time, over my 1 year, 25 software updates averaging 15 days in between each update. Now, of course, the next section of this video is going to be some of the fun that we had with it, and then finalizing everything will be why we actually traded it in and the numbers between the two. But I did want to say, thanks to Sky Crew, that's the name of the car. We had a great time. It launched our YouTube channel. We did a ton of charging tests with it, and it's an incredible car. So off to the memories. So we've taken a lot of adventures with this car. It's taken us around the country, literally, all the way from here in the East Coast to California and back, up and down the East Coast many times from all the data you've seen, of course. And it is a sad day as we say goodbye. But we are not done with Model 3s, because right now we are on our way to the Tesla showroom where I'm trading this car into Tesla. This will become their problem. And we are picking up a brand new Model 3 Performance. Here is the new beast, a Performance Model 3, midnight silver on white. Absolutely loving this thing. Let's talk quick costs. Tesla gave me $35,000 for the black Model 3, which is crazy because 3 weeks prior I submitted a trade request and they said they'd only give me 22 grand. So they came up at the last second. I was going to private sell it or keep it. I don't know what I was going to do with it, but they gave me 35 grand. I said, are you sure? Like, this car's been through a lot. They said, no problem, go right ahead. So that was fantastic. We traded it in on this. I also had $5,500 referral credit in my account, and that's from, I had a Powerwall from the early days back when I had my Model S, and I was able to switch that to just credit. So got $5,500 towards this thing, plus a tax credit. I forget exactly what the difference was. This thing was $59,000 with delivery, so you can subtract all the difference, and that's what it comes to. Anyway, absolutely loving this thing. This is going to be the new out-of-spec mobile, at least traveling me around while we're not reviewing other cars. And then, you know, we don't give this car enough credit, but this is our little smart car, and this is really the best car on the planet, I think, at least. I love this thing so much. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. We're going to miss our Model 3. If anyone buys it, please let me know. We'd love to meet up with anyone who gets it, but there's your 60,000 mile update and the reason why we're selling it.